Blessings, Shalom fam. Welcome to the channel. For those who do not know, my name is Crystal. Welcome. Welcome the new subscribers. Thank you for your comments, your support, your emails, everything. Okay, so where do I even start? The Lord has been really pressing on me lately to do my testimony. I did post my testimony about 4 years ago, but I did not go into detail. And on this video, the Lord wants me to get right, raw, and dirty, and deep, and talk about the things that I've gone through in my life as I started growing up as a child until I got older, into all the way up until I got saved. First and foremost, I am healed. God healed me from everything, from pain, trauma, whatever I'm about to say. Do not feel bad for the things that I've gone through. It was just my life. That's the way it is. I can't change it, can't do anything, but God is greater. Okay? If I do cry, it is not because of pain or trauma or anything like that. It's because I know where God took me from and how He's changed me so much that even me telling the story, yes, I'm a visual learner, so sometimes I will have a vision of when I tell a story. God chose me to tell stories. This is how I do testimonies with Him, is through stories. So during my testimony, I will go into stories, the things that I've gone through and stuff, and that's just how God made me. I can't just really just pinpoint things out, but I know through stories too could help somebody else, because if they've known that I've gone through such hurt and pain and trauma and all those things, if it's to help save somebody else, so be it. But if, like I said, if I do end up crying, it's because I know where God has taken me. He has truly done a big transformation with me in my life. Looking back, it's like I never lived that life. That wasn't even me. It was just somebody else telling a story, and that's exactly how it feels like in my life at this moment. So I just wanted to clear that out. And yeah, Lord, I just ask you to help lead me and guide me, because it's just so much. And yeah, like I said, I'm a storytell person, so I like to tell the stories as I go, all the way up till I was about saved. I'll try to be as quick as I can, and we're just gonna get right through it. Okay, so my mother was a single parent. I didn't know my dad. Let's see. So I had my brother and we were 11 months apart. We were the same age for 1 month. We had the same mom and same dad. I didn't find out till I was in about grade 5 that I had other brothers and sisters. Growing up, my mom being very mentally ill. I did have a good childhood when I was younger, till about, I think it was about grade 2 or 3, and then something just switched. We started moving around a lot. My mom ended up blaming me when I was 8 for her life, the way that how things were happening in her life. It was like something like a switch happened as I got older in life. I did have good people throughout my whole entire walk. What I'm about to say, even all the bad things that happened to me, there was always somebody that God put in my path to help me, to help protect me in some way, and to teach me and guide me. Most of my life too, I thought I raised myself, how in good morals and just how you treat somebody, but I didn't know that it was God training me who I meant to be. When I started reading the Bible, when I got saved, it all started making sense, because everything that is inside of my heart and who I am, truly am, what Satan was trying to destroy, is how God made me to be. And I just see the world differently, and I don't belong in this world. The way that how I feel towards people, it's not how it's supposed to be. So I just wanted to clear that up. Okay, so growing up, things were good, but then I remember at a certain point of time in my younger years, I started to get bullied a lot. I remember when we lived in this one place, it was a small city. I think I was about 10 years old. I would hang around with two girlfriends. But these other people, I guess it was a boy and a couple other girls, they were really, really bad bullies. I remember at times when my friend and I would go to the park and they'd catch us and make us stand in a circle and fight one another till pretty much we couldn't fight each other anymore. It was just truly not a good thing. The same bully as well. I remember being with my friend. We skipped school that day, and that girl punched my friend in the face. And yeah, it was not a great day. How were we gonna tell her parents? But I remember one night too, they ended up chasing me and my friend that night, and we ran like far, like super fast as we could to try to get back to the house where I was living at. When I got back in the house, they were standing outside, and there was like a 2 stained glass window. It was like really small. And I got so mad, I swore UFB, that's what I said, and I smashed my hand through the window. I practically almost lost my finger that night, but they never bothered, never bullied me again. That was the end of it. I stood up for myself. And that's when I noticed too that things in my life, no matter where we moved, I was always the new kid. I've always got bullied all the time. And I just started defending myself and fighting back. I remember one girl, after I think it was like the first week of school, she kept on following and started like trying to beat me up, pushing me from behind, and she just wouldn't stop. She just kept on going and going over and over again, and I just went behind her and I started beating the crap out of her. That's exactly how it was. I needed to defend myself. But again, traveled a lot. I remember when I think a year or two later, we ended up moving again to Manitoba in Canada. It's some places are really, really bad, a lot of gang territory. We moved into this one place that was actually in gang territory. It was Aboriginal gang. I remember being really young, maybe 12 years old or so, and being next door to a gang member. He was probably 19 years old at the time. I do know his first name and last name, but I shall not disclose it. But a situation happened that day when he came over, and my mom and my brother were there, and we were play fighting in the living room, and I accidentally ripped his shirt. Then again, I was about 12 and this person was 19 years old, a male figure. And because I ripped his shirt, he beat the crap out of me. I mean, beat the crap out of me, punched me in my face, kicked me in my stomach to the point where I was screaming and crying, asking somebody to help me. And my little brother standing there laughing at me. My mom sat there having a cigarette, didn't do nothing. I just ran and locked myself in the bathroom, and I didn't want to come out. And that's basically where things started taking a turn for the worse. I started smoking weed and smoking oil all the time. That's how I did to cope with my well-being, and listening to music, okay? But then again, my heart, I was just, I didn't understand what the things that were going on inside of my life at that time. So about 15 or 16 years old, about 15 years old, I started being very suicidal, taking antidepressants, going to see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist wouldn't even listen to a word that I would say. He just doped me on medication and sent me on my merry way. So I used to use those to get high. I think it was clonazepam that I was on. But my brother started to get very abusive at times. He beat the crap out of me, and my mom would stick up for me. But then again, I had a friend to take me overnight, and I'd stay over at their house, so that's God's protection there too, even though bad was happening. My mom blamed me a lot, saying my brother too also had a mental disability, but in reality, he never really did. He had ADHD, but that's as far as it went. She was very mentally ill. My brother and I could never think for ourselves. We couldn't do anything. We couldn't think, it was to the point where she was so mentally ill that she had to change the phone number every month. If I were to go outside and check the mail, she would automatically lock the door on me. thinking that somebody was coming to hurt her in some ways. I remember one time, this is when my mom found my other brothers and sisters and got to know them. This was a lot more, I met them in grade 5, but I think when I got a little bit older, they were starting to come around a bit. And at that time, I'm just going to skip ahead, but I'm just telling you about my mom a bit. So this is when I was a little bit older, after I already had my son. I was about 20 years old, and I was looking after my oldest sister's daughter at the time. She was 5 years old, and my sister said to go to my mom's house to go and spend time with her. So I did. I took my little niece over there to go see my mom. And when I got there, she was yelling at her and told me to get her out. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she says, get her out right now. She's an assassin. She's going to assassinate me. I said, Mom, she's your granddaughter. Your granddaughter's 5 years old. She is not going to assassinate you. And it got to that point where I went back to my sister's house. This is when my sister was alive. She ended up dying, but I'll get to that in a little bit. But that day we went down to the courthouse and we got a restraining order for her, and we put her in the mental home, and that's exactly where she went. Again, our whole family hated us. We thought we were doing wrong, but we did it for her safety because we loved her very much and we didn't want her harming herself. So skipping back to when I was 15, 16 years old, again, smoking weed, hanging around with kids, smoking weed, doing mushrooms, stuff like that at 16 years old. I was having a lot of boyfriends, but I know it was because I wanted somebody to love me at that point in time in my life, because honestly, I thought to myself, I want to have a baby. If I were to have a child, that maybe this child will love me more than my own parents or anybody that is my family. Again, that is not a great thing for a teenager to think at that point in time in life, and that's what I thought. I did everything in my willpower to get pregnant, and I did. It was somebody that was actually really older than me. The person lied about his age. He was 8 years older than me. I did get pregnant about 16 and a half. I was almost 17 years old. I was 17. I got pregnant at 16, 17, because I remember I had him just a couple months after I turned 18 years old. But the father wanted me to have an abortion. I went through a lot when I was pregnant, but I didn't want to give up, because even though I wasn't with God, I was brought up with a pastor and his wife, and they did Jews for Jesus. So I did get some kind of love, even though I was going through bad things. God put them in my life. And yeah, I hope I'm not losing my mind here for a second. Not my mind, but my train of thought there for a second. But anyways, I just knew that it was wrong to have an abortion at that time, and I didn't. So I ended up having my son. Let's see here. So after I had my son, my little brother, the one that we had the same mom and same dad, we were hanging around wrong people at the time. So I'm just going to skip back. I hope I'm not being confusing in any way. So I remember at this time, before I got pregnant, I was hanging around with these bad girls. The girl was into gangs, and her cousin also was into gangs. My brother hung around with him, and I hung around with her. But it got to the point where they wanted me to be a part of their gang. And for initiation, I had to set up a girl to get beaten, and I had to watch her in a circle and get beaten the crap out of her. When that happened, and I couldn't watch the person being beaten up like that, God took me out right in that moment. I didn't have the heart to do that. I felt super bad that I set this girl up to get beaten the crap out of. It wasn't for me. And I didn't, I know now why, is because I was just not meant to walk down that road. So, but yeah, my brother hung around with this kid, and at times too, I remember before he had his accident, him and his friend were outside, and that kid and some other kids were chasing him with the shovels. So they were obviously some way too out to get my brother. My brother went through a lot of things too as well. He'd be stripped butt naked, and he'd go missing for a day or so, and we'd go try to look for him as we lived near the water, like it was a river along not far from where we lived. And I remember my adopted uncle, well, he was like my uncle. We were walking one day and we see my brother practically stripped butt naked, and these kids, I guess, made him climb up a tree by the river. So if that branch would have broke, it would have been good. But he went through a lot as well. He was bullied a lot because he was very, very dark skinned. He looked East Indian. Nobody believed me that he was my brother, that we came from the same mom and same dad. At times I'd make fun and say he was born in a toilet, that's why he was crap brown. I'm sorry, but I had to laugh at that. But you know, it seems like our lives, you know, we were just always treated wrongly, both my brother and I. So after I had my son, my brother had an accident. He was missing for 3 days. Nobody knew where he was, or so my mom called me and told, because I was living on my own at that time. I was about 18 years old, and she called me and told me that my brother was missing for 3 days. And so we thought nothing of it, because he would always do something stupid or whatever, that he wouldn't come home for a day or so. So I didn't even think anything of it. And me being a major stoner, every day smoked weed from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. I was a major stoner even all through high school. I don't even know how I even graduated, but again, I had a great teacher that helped me along the way. He even came to my house after I had my son and made me go back to school, and he helped take care of my son during my spares and paid for me to go to a vocational school so that I was able to get a credit, so then I was able to get a job. So, but okay, back to the story. So my brother, I remember him being missing for 3 days. I remember my mom calling me. I went to school that day. It was the most happiest. Something happened at school. I remember it was like the most happiest day that I've ever experienced. I was so happy. But I was baked out of my mind, and my mom called me and told me that they found my brother and that we needed to go to the hospital. So we went to the ER, and when I got there, I seen my brother tied to the bed, and he had blood all over his body, and he was convulsing and having seizures. I just broke down in front of the nurse, and I started crying. I didn't know what to think or feel, but he ended up being in a coma for about 6 months. So just imagine that, being in a coma for your 18th birthday. They wanted to pull the plug, but because my mom was mentally ill, she kept on saying no, no, no. She didn't want to give up. So he ended up waking up, but he was completely mush inside. He had to learn how to walk and talk all over again. I remember putting my son on the bed when he woke up, because my son was maybe 5 or 6 months old at the time, and he just started drinking from the bottle. That's exactly what my brother did. He wasn't the same. So now the doctor said that he would, because there was fluid around the brain, that it would just eventually shrink, and then he'll have no oxygen and he'll just die. The doctor said that he was going to live 6 months, but he pushed 11 years, and then he committed suicide. He hung himself. That's exactly what happened. He died when he was 28 years old. So all through that whole time of the 11 years, I'd have to watch my brother suffer through pain and fall asleep with food in his mouth, have bald spot on his head. He'd do crazy things out in the public, and he just wasn't there. And he'd always cry and complain and just wish that mom would have pulled the plug on him, that he was just in so much pain and so much suffering. And just imagine how I felt for my little brother. I couldn't help him. So that took a lot of turmoil too on my life, watching my brother go through those things. So, so I graduated college. I had a great job. I was a cook. I ended up going to school to become a counselor, for an addictions counselor and community services, to work either with people that were in jail and suffering from addictions. That's why God has called me to do this ministry, because I went to school for that. But I also went to school for that because all the stuff that I've been through growing up. that I thought maybe I could heal myself. A lot of things I learned, a lot of like that, that schooling was very, very hard because I think there was about 20 people that joined and only 4 of us graduated, because a lot of people left that the schooling, because if a person was raped, you had to counsel these people, and a lot of the girls wouldn't do that. They just weren't healed inside. It was a very hard thing to do, that those courses, because you had to confront your past life and the things that you've gone through and stand up in the class and talk about it. A lot of people are not healed. They weren't able to do that. Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a second because I'm going to think where I need to continue. Okay, so when I was about 18, 19 years old, I was with the children's dad at the time. He was very abusive physically. His dad was actually a sergeant cop, and he got a restraining order. He was not allowed to see me. I ended up, God took me out, and God put me actually with his parents at the time. They took care of me and my son. Then again, in the end result, it wasn't good because they were a snake under the rug, and I will get to that in a little while. But I was able to work for the government and the education department. I was able to do a lot of things, and they tried to hand me a lot of things too, that I didn't even have to go for an interview. I could have worked straight for the government if I wanted to, but I chose not to do that because I didn't want things handed to me. I wanted to work for something that was great for myself. I wanted to do it on my own, and there was a reason for it. Thank you, Lord, that I didn't proceed with that. But so I ended up staying with them for a while, but then I ended up moving back with him. And at that time, he was going through college or some kind of welding thing that he was going through. And at that time, he started hanging around with the wrong crowd and doing methamphetamines and stuff like that. And I ended up doing it, until the point one day that I woke up and my son was coming out of the bedroom. I think he was like maybe 2 years old, and I couldn't take care of him. And that day or that week was I took my son and I left, and I didn't return. I disappeared. That's exactly what I did. I wasn't going to put my son through those things, and I couldn't do it. So I left. I did everything, like I started to live on my own, and my sisters were around at that time, so I got a little bit of support then. I had a great job, so it's not like I wasn't working or anything. And then I just became a great mom. I didn't want to be around the drugs. I didn't want to do anything of that. I didn't want to live that life that I was living. Fast forward for a few years after that, I think it was maybe 10 years, he ended up coming back in the picture. I ended up taking him back, having another kid, and things just got worse. He wasn't into drugs or anything, but he took me for all my money and every dime, and racked all my credit stuff up. Probably owes me like over 30 grand, and it was just too much. I supported him through everything, and it was just really bad. But I know now there just wasn't meant to be with this person. But through all that time, my oldest sister ended up passing away. She died of hypothermia in a cave. But that one whole year started taking for a turn. This is 10 years skipping, okay? So I did have good years in that time. So from when I was about 20 to about 29, I had good years. I had a good job. My life was going great, so on and so forth, until things started taking for another turn in my life. So being with this man again and having a child, and things just weren't going great. My sister, he was very, so the dad, he was being more like, not physically abusive, but more mentally and stuff like that. And I just, honestly, where I was working at my job, I was saving money to leave him and to take my sons with me. That was my plan, to do that. But in that time, that 1 year that before we split up that year, my sister ended up passing away, like I just said, and then my brother ended up committing suicide. So that was very, very hard for me to deal with. And I know with my brother, I loved him so much, but again, I know that he committed suicide, but at the same time, God was allowing me to say goodbye to my brother. I'm telling you, where I worked, I would be on that transit bus at about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and that bus would be so packed. Excuse me. This was the day before my brother committed suicide. I was on my way to work, and that bus was like super, super packed. Like, I don't even think that anybody else would be able to fit on that bus. And I remember stopping at a stoplight, and I was sitting way at the back of the bus at the window, and I look across the street and I see my brother kicking a pole, and there was a man standing there, and I'm just like thinking to myself, like, what are you doing? Like, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. Why are you kicking a pole? I'm telling you, not kidding you, my brother looked at the bus, and he seen me. Out of all those people on that bus, he seen me. He literally stopped what he was doing, and he crossed that street. And I was already knowing what was going to happen. I know he's my brother, right? So I'm like, oh man, great. I started feeling embarrassed inside of me. So he got on the bus, and he told the bus driver, like, hold up. And I was just like, man. So everybody was staring at my brother. He walked literally all the way to the back of the bus, and everybody was staring at me that day. And he's like, sis, I love you. And I'm like, dude, man, just go home and behave yourself. Just go home. And he's like, I love you. Can I give you a hug? And I said, yes. So I gave him a hug. Everybody staring at me. I felt so awkward, but I loved my brother, whatever, right? So that was the last time I seen my little brother. That night too, again, living in the ghetto area, people doing drugs and stuff like that. I remember I was super high that night, and it was with a kind of like my uncle and his family. And I remember we were about to walk inside the house, and I got a text message on my phone saying my brother hung himself. Those were the words, your brother hung himself. That's exactly what it was. And when we walked in, I didn't even know what to think or do within me. I was just like, I fell to the ground and screaming and crying. Everybody was like, what's wrong? And I just handed them the phone, and I didn't even know how to handle it. I didn't know. And it was from an aunt that I didn't even know. She didn't even know me. I've maybe met her one time, and it was on from my mom's side, but it was just really bad. I just couldn't believe all this stuff was happening. First, my sister died in May of that year, and then it was my brother the 1 year later in May again, and my brother committed suicide. So to me, at this point in time in my life, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to leave the children's dad at that point in time. So my other sister that is alive, I ended up moving with her into a small town outside where I was living. And I had my two boys with me at the time. But the father's mother messaged me through Facebook wanting to spend the week with them. I'm just going to take a sip here. So they wanted to spend the whole week with them. So I allowed it. But when she came, it was crazy because my stomach was so upside down and turned around, like I knew something was going to happen. I've never felt that feeling ever in my whole entire life, like that stomach turning. I know now, years later, that it was actually God. God was warning me not to do it, not to allow them to go, but I didn't know. I was young, I was stupid, taking antidepressants, smoking weed. I did not know. So they took them for the whole entire week. When it was time for me to get them back, they changed absolutely everything on me, through the government, the birth certificate, the health card, all that stuff. So I called the government and told them, what they did. And the person was like, well, you got to go to courts for that stuff to reverse it. I didn't have money for that. I didn't come from a good family. I was the only one that was the sane person trying to make good in my life at that point in time. And because his mother worked for the government, she worked straight under the mayor. Yes, she did. She was able to change everything just like that, pretending that she was super nice to me. But look what happened in the end. At that time, I took a lot of antidepressants when my children got basically kidnapped from me. I did not know that it was called kidnapped, but they told me that if I were to try to fight for my children, that I would lose and I would never be able to get to see them again. And being young like that and nobody really actually teaching you right from wrong, not coming from a good family, I just took it as it was. And I thought to myself, well, if I were to fight for my kids and knowing that I'm going to lose, and after just losing my brother and my sister and all this stuff happening, I would never be able to live with myself. And that's what I thought at the time, that the enemy was truly at war with me, trying to take me out. So that was very hard for me to deal with. But again, I hid my feelings. I was able to cope and to continue to smoke weed. And I believed in God, but I didn't know him, like have a personal relationship. I knew that he existed, but I was just like, I can't do this. And the job that I worked for, it was through an airline company. And I got a different opportunity just before my 30th birthday, because this is when my brother passed away. I was almost 30 years old, because I was 1 year older than him. He died at 28. I was 29 turning 30. So I had a great opportunity for me to move away to a different city, to a different province, as I'm Canadian. So I took it. I remember being on the phone with my mother and telling her that I was moving away, and she told me that I was not allowed to. I almost believed her. I was almost gonna follow what she was saying, but I was like, no, man, I'm like 30 years old. I can do whatever that I want. And I moved away. And I'm telling you right now, that was the best decision that I've ever made in my whole entire life, even though I ended up hitting rock bottom. But overall, it was the best decision that I could ever do. You got to change your people, places, and things, and I needed to do that. Okay. So 30 years old, moving to a new place, everything started going well, and then I started hanging around with this guy. He ended up doing MDMA, did a lot of drugs. I don't even know how I worked, I don't even know. I was so messed up. But again, I ended up being with another person. Then he was very manipulative, very narcissistic, like very to the point where I wanted to commit suicide. I remember the 3 years that I was with this person, I did so much drugs. I did ecstasy every day for a whole entire year. I did crack, I did coke, I did meth, I smoked meth, I snorted meth, I did, I guess they call it molly, I did antidepressants, I snorted antidepressants. I did basically everything except needles. Drugs was my choice, alcohol wasn't. So anything that I can get drugs on, my hands on, that's what I did. I did that for 3 years straight. I remember one time it was Christmas, and I wanted to get so messed up in my whole entire life. And I remember I didn't sleep for 4 days doing ecstasy. And that day I took everything. I took crack, cocaine, MDMA, I took meth, I took antidepressants, I took everything, anything and everything. I wanted to get as high as that I ever could. I remember that night I couldn't even walk on my 2 feet. I was crawling on the floor, just going to the bathroom, and so messed up. And I remember praying in the bathroom and asking God to help save me, because there was no way. I probably never would have survived that night, because I was so messed up. Like I wanted to die. That's exactly what it was. But I'm just skipping forward here for a bit. I'm almost done. And it got to the point where that person that I was with, it was so mentally abusive that I ended up writing swear words all over my body with permanent marker that time, and I wanted to commit suicide. So this was the night that I hit rock bottom. I took a knife and I went to the bathroom, and I just sat in the tub with a knife, and I was just like banging it on the tub, and I was screaming. This person that I was with was living in an apartment building, and I guarantee that whole entire apartment building probably heard me. And I was just banging and I'm banging. I'm like, Lord, you win, you win. I gave up this life. I don't want this life anymore. You win. Like I don't want to do it my way. I want to do it your way. And I just kept on screaming and crying out to God with all my well-being. But I didn't do anything to myself. I did just like God was holding me back. And I'm not kidding you. The next day he kicked me out. So I know that was God. He got me out because I surrendered to him and I asked him. And I'm telling you, I I did not get saved that night. I didn't get saved till about 3 years after that point. But at that point in time in my life, because I've been through so much and I hit rock bottom, I was like, Lord, I'm not making my own decisions anymore. I'm not doing it my own way. I'm not choosing who I want to be with. That from that day forward was pretty much, God, you are doing it for me. This is why I say to help save you guys from doing God's will. Because I don't want the stuff that I've been through. I don't want anybody to experience the things that I have experienced, trying to do things on my own and trying to end up in a dead end road or hitting rock bottom to the point where you do not want to live your life anymore. This is why too I say in this channel, on this ministry, is to do God's will, to save people from experience these pains and traumas, all the stuff that I've gone through. I do not wish anybody to go through the things that I went through in my life. Because of going through so much, I know that God has called me to help others as well. Because if God can save me through all the stuff, He can save you. It is never the end result of it. So again, God put me with a great person in my life, and I did well for, working as a, what is it? Hang on a second. I'm just gonna have to pause because of the dogs. So yeah, God allowed great things to happen in my life. So I started doing things His way. And those who have watched my first testimony that I've done, I do get into detail of this person that I ended up dating for a little while. I remember working at a hotel, and I know sometimes God will put people on our path to help us get saved, or whatever the case may be, onto the journey some way, somehow. God orchestrates everything in order. So I do know that now, but I need to tell the story for you guys to understand, because this story ends up leading to me being saved with God. So I remember a year or two after that me hitting rock bottom, I didn't want to be with anybody, but I felt like the desire to try to date somebody. So I remember I ended up the Lord showed me to go on Plenty of Fish. I don't know if you guys ever know, that's like a dating site. But I ended up making a profile, but I was like so leery. I didn't want to pick the wrong person again. I was trying to make the better myself and not hang around with the people that I was so used to being around with. So before I get into that, it was because of me hitting rock bottom. I wanted to change that vicious cycle that I was in, because all I known was hanging around with bad men my whole entire life, and I did not want to do that anymore in my life. Like I ended up going to them because that's all I knew in my walk, in my life. I didn't know how to be loved, and honestly, during those times, if I were to ever go on a date with somebody that was actually loving, and I remember one time I went on a date and this dude set a bath for me with candles. I ended up dumping him because I was like, this was too much for me. I didn't know how to handle it. But yeah, I couldn't even be at family outings. I feel very uncomfortable. Like I just didn't know how to deal with it, and that's what Satan did with inside of me. Was just, I wanted to love, and I was a love giver. But to receive it, it wasn't, that was not in my cards at the time, That's how Satan tried to destroy me too from that. I'm not like that now, thank you, Lord. But okay, so now I'm going to fast forward. So this person, getting to know this person online, and I felt like it was like, okay, he seemed like a really great guy. Anyways, so I remember one time that I was getting off from work. I used to take it's called a train. Like I used to take a train where I lived, and I remember getting off a little bit earlier as I just moved into this new area that I was in, and I was living with a roommate at the time that I worked with, the girl that I worked with. God put me with her for a time, and so so I remember getting off the train that day, walking down the street, and I see this house. And as I looked at the house, sorry if I'm closing my eyes because I'm trying to see visual. I looked at the house and I seen that there was a white truck there, and then there was a quad with the truck. And I just stopped to myself and I said, oh, this is awesome. I would love to be with a man that's like that, who'd love to do quadding. I've never seen nobody was outside. I'm not kidding you, okay? So I just thought in my mind. I was happy about it, and then I just went on my merry way, and I was just like, okay, whatever. So a couple weeks later, this person that I was talking to wanted to go on a date with me, and he said that he wanted to go quadding, and I was like, man, I love quadding. I'm a tomboy. I love to do guy things like that. So anyways, so he ends up picking me up from work, and I didn't think anything of it. So okay, we go on this date. We're in the mountains. We end up going quadding. I had an awesome time. You know, it was great. It was awesome. Anyways, so he's like, do you want to come back to my house? But I was like thinking to myself, I'm a little leery on that. You know, I don't do stuff like that. But I kind of recognize the neighborhood. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if something goes bad, at least I know where I am, because it was a new town that I lived in. The city was really big. So you'd have to be there for years and years to actually know all the ins and outs of where everything is. But anyways, we're driving down the street, and I'm like, man, this road looks familiar. And then it just dawned on me, oh my goodness, you know. And then we pull up to the house, and I'm like, I'm sitting on the passenger side, about to have a freaking heart attack. I'm gonna say freaking, I don't swear, but I was about to have a heart attack. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I just noticed at the house, and it was the truck that I was in, and I remember the color of the quad was red. So what that month ago that I walked down that street, and I looked at that house, and I looked at that truck, and I looked at that quad, it was the same person. It was this person's house. Like, what are the odds of that happening? I was just blown away. I'm like, man, saying to myself, Lord, if I tell this person's gonna think that I'm just completely nuts. But see, now I know that it was orchestrated by God. Okay, so being with this person in a relationship, we had a great time. And to be honest, I think that God put this person in my life because my whole entire life I was always treated badly and always had bad relationships. That this person, it was like God put this person in my path to show me that there is good men out there. He did treat me well. In all, he ended up did end up cheating on me, but I still did not blame it, because it just wasn't meant to happen. I was just more thankful in that time that God was just showing me that there are good men out there, and I can be treated well. And I knew God was doing a thing that way. So I did not regret it. I was actually totally happy and grateful and thankful that actually God put me with this person. Thank you, Jesus, because it kind of delivered me in some way, somehow. Okay. So anyways, this person was a concrete worker. And I remember he had all these animals, and he wanted me to look after his house for a week or so. Okay, so it was his grandmother's house. I'm sitting there on the couch, and I remember watching a Christian network station. It was like a sermon about forgiveness, I think it was. And I remember getting off the couch, and there was a bookshelf there, and I seen there was a Bible there, so I picked up the Bible, but it was a different version. It wasn't like the King James version, where sometimes when you're a new believer, it's hard for you to read it and understand. I picked it up, and I'm like, man, I understand. This is actually a pretty good Bible. So next thing you know, I'm just calling my mom and telling her that I forgive her for all the wrongs that she did to me. It wasn't asking her for her to that I needed her forgiveness. She needed to apologize to me. No, it was the other way around. That even though she treated me wrong, I still said, Mom, can you forgive me? I needed to let myself go and my well-being for me to heal. So at that time I called her, and I was crying, and next thing you know I was calling the prayer line and all this stuff. And I just said to God that day, Lord, I want to continue moving forward with you. I want to do it your way and not my own. And I just prayed, and I'm not telling you, be careful what you pray for, because that night was the day that things started changing again. Okay, so the roommate that I'm living with at the time, okay, God put me with her. I'm not kidding you. The next morning I wake up, and there's a text message. You know, the text message said, your stuff is all outside. They put the key in the mailbox. I was like, what? Lord, seriously? I'm homeless now, and I just thought my life was just getting great. Serious, Lord? What is happening now? I don't want to move backwards. I do not want to go back to the life that I was living. I do not want to move back to where I was living from before, where bad things were happening. I just wanted to move forward. But you know what? I was just like, hey, Lord. I started laughing, and I'm like, Lord, I don't know what you were doing today, but I trust you, and I'm just going to go get my stuff, whatever the case may be. And I was laughing about it. I'm just like, okay, Lord, seriously. Sorry, the dryer. Hang on a second. So God is so funny. Okay. it all ties in, and I'm just gonna get to that in a minute. So I took my bike. I didn't tell the guy that I was dating at the time what was happening. I took my bike, and at the time I had a really like $500 worth bike that I got, and it was like tubeless tires. So I drove my bike all the way over there to that place where I was staying at, and I remember passing a church on the way. It wasn't like a weekend, it was a weekday. So I think there was like maybe a couple cars in the parking lot. I passed the church, I get to the place, I load up the stuff on my bike, and guess what? My bike tires are flat. And I'm like looking up in the sky. I'm like, seriously, Lord? Like whatever else that could ever happen to me today. Like seriously, man, dude. So I just walk my bike and I have my stuff with me, whatever the belongings that I could ever carry. And then I am walking my bike past this church. I am not kidding you. It started feeling like as I was passing the church, my bike and my feet started feeling like I was in quicksand. Like I couldn't pass this church. And I looked up in the sky and I'm like, no, I am not going in there. I am not going in there. And I just tried to keep on walking, ignoring God. And God would, honestly, he would not let me pass this church. My feet literally felt like quicksand. And I'm like, look up, probably, I hope nobody was watching me because I'm like talking to myself at this point. And I'm like, fine. And then I just take my bike across the street. And I leave my bike there at the window at the door. And I'm like, Lord, whatever, man. If my stuff gets stolen, that's all I've got. Like, I have nothing else. Like, what can I lose? So I go inside. The church is like completely empty. I'm like, Lord, like, why are you even bringing me here? Excuse me. So I just walk down this hallway and I see this lady come up with a whole bunch of little kids. And I felt like so awkward and stuff. She's like, hey, can I help you? And I'm just like, this is what happened today, and I went with my bike, and my tires were flat, and God, I couldn't walk past the church, and God told me to come in here, and I honestly felt like a crazy person, but the lady didn't think I was crazy because she sat me down and she started crying, and she's like, the Lord brought you here, and this and that, and she said a prayer for me. I didn't understand what was going on. Like I knew about God, but not like knew about God, you know, but I was just like, okay, Lord, whatever. Okay, so I left that day, didn't think anything of it. When that person that I was dating, I ended up telling him, and I was just praying to God. He allowed me to stay with him and live with him for a while. Even though he just, his last person that he was with, he was in a very, very long relationship for like 10 years since he was like in high school. But I know that God put us in the path for a reason. But fast forward, we ended up separating because he cheated on me. But then again, when I think we dated for a whole entire year, and then after that year, after that lady that kicked me out, my roommate, God put the same person in my path again. See, this is why you do not, if stuff like that happens, you need to take it back to God, because sometimes God will use your enemies to make a greater impact. Like there's always a reason why sometimes God will put certain people in your path, and this is why too he wants me to do this, because I am a testimony when it came to that. So that person that kicked me out for no apparent reason, she ended up calling me and asking me to meet her for lunch, and I took it. I wasn't going to be prideful in my heart and just say like, you know, this person kicked me out, I'm just going to have revenge on them. No, I felt it like it was an opportunity, because there was absolutely nobody in my life to be there for me to live with, for me to move forward, because I didn't know anybody else where I was living, only her. And God was like opening up a door for me. I know that now, that God was opening up a door for me to be with her. Okay, so I ended up taking it. She asked me to come back, and I came back, and I'm telling you, things were great. I ended up living with her for about another 2-3 years. We worked together. I was a supervisor on a college campus. She ended up getting stage 4 cancer. Her mom ended up dying. I was there for her to support her and stuff like that. But I know why too. God put me in the path with her, and in that time with her, I ended up getting saved. I'm not kidding you. So God orchestrates things in ways that we don't even think or ask. I remember that year, the time that I got saved was, I remember, because we used to smoke weed a lot on the college campus, even though we were supervisors. Okay, yes, I did that. And 90% of the people that I looked after, because I had about 18 people on my staff, they were all adults, and 95% of them were all Muslim. They believed in Allah. Only a couple of them were Christian. Okay. I loved that job. I loved it. I loved being a supervisor. It was very hard. I looked after like 4 buildings, but I know God was training me in that. It was training me. That's exactly what he was doing. So I just, everything from like working at the bottom, working all the way up to a supervisor within like 3 months. I worked my way up. I worked hard, and I just, yeah, it was awesome. But anyways, I remember being on break on a Spirit. I ended up going to her building, and there was her staff that were taking a break. And I remember this Muslim kid, I forget what his name was. He was pretty funny at that time. Like, not at that time. He was a funny man. Anyways, he was looking some stuff on Facebook, and it, not on Facebook, on something, I think it was on YouTube. But I love sky phenomenal stuff, and I'm not kidding you. I know this video was real because the way the person was video recording it, the cars were like, when he was zooming in and out, the cars were going by. So I know that it wasn't fake. But it was like a globe like this, and it will look like a picture of like the whole entire earth. But the earth, it was like see-through, and it was just sitting like this on a ball. And then there was like a ring around, like it was all the different colors of the rainbow, and it was just sitting still like this, like in the sky, like near the ground. And the ball was just sitting like that, and the ring was like this, and it was just saying like right in the sky. And I was like, what is that thing? Like, I was just so like puzzled about it. I'm like, man, that you don't see things like that. I tried to find the video, I cannot find it. I remember sharing it to my Facebook that day, and I remember them taking it down, and I was like so puzzled. I'm like, I need to figure out why they're taking it down. There's always a reason, because I'm a person that likes to test everything and see, why are they hiding something. I'm always a person that attention to detail. So at home that night, I was just checking over and over again. I'm like, why, Lord? Like, why did they take it down? I was just searching, like, I need to know these things. And then next thing you know, I was watching a video of Dana Ashley off YouTube talking about something about the Holy Spirit. Next thing you know, I watched that video. Next thing you know, I was repenting, giving up my life to God, and I just got saved and went to bed. I had a dream, and the dream is I actually thought I died and went to heaven. It was all pure white. And I know, and I felt it was Father God sitting on the throne, and I can feel angels around in a circle. If you guys read the book of Enoch, Enoch describes the same thing, that how angels in heaven were around in a circle. And I remember I could just feel it, and I just knew in my knowing that it was in heaven. But the sound was so loud, like a machinery light times a 1,000 times 1,000. Like, this was so loud that my ears, when I was sleeping, I thought that my ears were going to snap and break off in half. That's the pain, that it was so bad. I could never explain that sound. But at the same time, it was the most beautiful thing that I've ever experienced in my whole entire life. I did not want to wake up from this dream, even though this sound was so loud. So I woke up and I was like, wow, what is this? So then I just went back to sleep, and then I dreamt about my bike tires being flat. And the tire was like straight at my face when I dreamt it. And then I was like waking up, and I'm like, what's going on or whatever. And then I called my mom. My mom, even though she was ill, she did believe in God. But now I know that it was just, she was lukewarm. But anyways, I called her, and I'm like, Mom, this is what happened. I got saved last night. And then I had a dream about this. I thought I died, blah, blah, blah. And she starts crying on the phone, and she's like, Crystal, you're saved, God is in. And she was just crying, and I'm like, I didn't understand the bike tires. And she's like, don't you remember that time when God told you to go into the church? And then it clicked. God was showing his confirmation when he told me to go in the church. I understood, and I'm telling you, from that day forward, my life started changing. So I knew God was talking to me, but I was just taking the chance. God was saying that week to actually go and find a place to live. And I'm like, why? Like, Lord, I don't even have any money. Like, I have zero money, and I get paid, and my rent's due in like a week to pay for my roommate. So, I just went for it. I just walked by faith. I just thought, okay, maybe I am hearing for him. I'm just going to walk by faith and just do it. And that's what I did. I ended up going to look at a place that was for rent, and where the landlord was an Iranian. And he showed me this apartment, and I'm like, this thing was like filthy dirty, and I'm like, it was small. I'm like, I am not paying money for that. I think he said it was like $600 or something. And I'm like, no. And he's like, well, if you want, I got this other place that's for rent, but it's further down the road. And I told him I don't have a vehicle. And he's like, well, I can drive you, and we can go there. And I said, okay, I'll try. I trusted him. I just went for it. And we went there. When we got to it, it was like a house. And it was like a bottom part of a house. I'm not kidding you. When we walked to the back, when we opened up the door, the porch was like huge. And then we walked through another door and we walked downstairs. It was like a big kitchen, had a washer and dryer inside. It was a basement suite, and it was like by far the most awesomest apartment that I've ever seen. And it was like $700 a month. It was super cheap. Like I was like Lord, like what is going on? So, and then I was just telling him, look, like I only have this much money. I don't have money for a damage deposit, because where I come from, you need to have your damage deposit for the rent and stuff like that. He was okay with it. He made a payment plan with me, payment plan for me to live there in that place. So he ended up signing a contract with me and made a payment plan. I was able to make payments with him. I got a cat. I moved there, and things were going great. For my work and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna fast forward to me after being saved. So me being lonely and stuff like that, and me being in bad relationships my whole entire life. And I was like, God, I remember being at home one time when I got home from work. I think it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, because I'd work until 11 p.m., but I wouldn't be home till midnight. I remember just sitting in the tub, and I was just crying to God, and I'm like, Lord, if I deserve somebody, I don't want to be with anybody, but Lord, if I deserve it, if that's okay, I would love to be with somebody, and it won't be me asking it or wanting it. You would tell this person to tell me that that person is for me. So I'm just gonna stop right there. But the journey of it is God moved me and, showed me my calling and all that stuff within that time. It hasn't been easy, but God did reveal to me who my kingdom spouse is, and I'm still standing, and I'm just waiting for the journey to be where it is, and God's calling me now to ministry, so on and so forth. But I know this is just the beginning, and I wanted to share my testimony with you guys. I apologize if it's a little long, but I just prayed before the video and asked the Lord to help lead me and guide me on what He wanted me to say. And I just pray that this helps somebody, knowing that if God can save me and all the stuff that I've been through, and being truly completely healed and walking into my purpose and into the ministry that God is calling me to do, if He can do it for me, He can do it for you, and it's never too late. There is nothing that we've ever did wrong that He can never save us and help us and to become who we truly are. The stuff that Satan has planted inside of us, telling us that we are not worthy, that we are nothing, that is just a bunch of lying, and it comes from the pits of hell. But I love you guys, and I hope this testimony was a blessing to somebody. I did post my first testimony. It's like one of the first videos that I've ever did. You can watch it, but I don't go into detail like I did today. But actually, I feel pretty good about doing this. But I love you guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, shalom.